I want to say is really to give a business perspective in order for other companies to maybe see a bit of the logic and the rationale of why we've done what we've done and why we're doing what we're doing, and maybe to see whether there are some connections with others. I appreciate, of course, that we are what is called in the trade a brand manufacturer. So it's a very specific consumer goods focus, of course, that I bring in. But I understand there will be the complete other side of the coin just following after. So I just go briefly through, and I think our approach is quite simple. Why we are engaged in water and why we've been really driving that agenda forward within the company and the franchise system is because it's so wonderfully obvious in the product. The fact that we need water to sell what we're selling is really right there on the shelf every day in our biggest brand. And one of the probably unique points that I have to say is that, of course, our one product, our one brand that we have is connected to the brand of the corporation. So whatever is around that product is immediately in the heart of the corporation. Although, and few people know this, there is a range of other products that we're producing as well. They're all drinks, they're all ready to drink products, but this one brand is actually driving the whole reputation of the company. So that connection, I appreciate, is quite unique, but one thing that is probably the same for Coke as for other consumer goods manufacturers is that if you are a drinks product producer, it is very obvious that water is what you need in your product, and you need it not only in sufficient quantity, but also in very high quality, because it is a food product, and it is not only expensive to treat it to a level, but also the more you treat, the more you will alter, and you have to fiddle around with it and with other ingredients in order to get the consistency of the taste and the quality of your final product. So it is really an essential key in what we're producing, although if you look at the normal numbers, and I haven't got the slide to compare us with other users, you would think that what Coke is using in producing drinks is probably an absolute minimal thing that other companies would be using, but you don't see it. Now, this is the way it is, and it is fine, but it is one thing to keep in mind. So Coke really is the overarching thing. Then the second thing is not only visible in our product, we are also visible on the ground. So this wonderful Coca-Cola sign is outside the bottling sites in about 100 locations in Europe and about 300 to 400 worldwide. So of course you also see that there is Coca-Cola all over the place. And when you then look at these famous slides of where is water stress, and there's a lot of debate of whether that is relevant, whether that is right, whether it is seasonally changing, etc. Still you see that if you are producing all over the place, there will be locations where there are at least seasonal water stress, where there's long-term water stress, where there are just sort of point problems, and you have to deal with this. And you are quite exposed if your production sites certainly are in these sort of really structural areas, like in the southern area of Spain, where everybody also is more and more aware that there are water resource issues. But equally, one of the things that you don't see, because everything is so on quantity, is the quality problems. And the more we're looking into water resource risks, yes, there are the red areas for quantity, but all over the place there are stress indicators for quality. And again, we need both to work right. And finally, the other thing is, it's not only relevant for us as a business in our product, in our production and bottling facilities, but of course more and more, and even more so in our supply chain. After all, we are sourcing natural ingredients, therefore agricultural goods. One of being, of course, is sugar. That is the biggest one. We are worldwide the largest industrial buyer of sugar. Which of course means that we are quite a big share of sugarcane growing and sugar beet growing. In particular in Europe, it's sugar beet that is local, but that is our sort of link to the supply chain and agriculture that is very critical to us. Plus fruit, plus tea, plus coffee, and these supply chain sources that we also need to be very aware of. And of course, all the issues and pressure points that are true for production sites are true for the supply chain. Be it on physical availability, on costs, on demand pressures and competition, regulatory limits, etc. So the issues and the risks are just multiplying the more you look outside your own, what Stuart called the fence, down into the supply chain. So the question is, what do you do about it? We've been looking into this for quite a long time with partners like the WWF. But for Europe, we have last year, and this is actually a very recent development, a new strategy for 2020 set up that looks across all our entire value chain, so from the sourcing to the consumer, and says what are the key impacts that we're having on the environment. And it is about, of course, packaging and packaging waste, and it's about carbon, but it's very much about water and sourcing. These two things for us are very closely interlinked. As I just said, because water goes between importance to operations and to bottling facilities, but also to agriculture. And so these two items, sourcing and water, have been designed together. The overall objective being that we can show, and we call this a destination, not so much of a commitment, because this is still very much moving, and it's very, understanding is growing of what that actually means. But what we want to achieve ultimately is to show that we have water sustainable bottling facilities, so our own operations are water sustainable, and our supply chain is water sustainable. Now, whether 2020 is the right timeline is probably very ambitious. Also, what does it mean? What does it mean in practice? What is water sustainability? These things are still evolving. But this at least is our direction of travel. This is where we want to get to. And if you then look below that overall strategy, what does that mean for water specifically? Well, the promise is that our bottling plants will be water sustainable, and we will replenish the water equivalent to what we have in the products back in the environment. For water along the value chain, manufacturing and ingredients, as I just said, are the key elements. There is relatively little, although still 19% of total water footprint comes from packaging, but that's sort of a third priority. Where water is involved. Distribution is very little, refrigeration and consumer recycling as well. So we need to really focus on where it matters, which is manufacturing and ingredients. And the how to achieve this is to really understand on each location, where does the water come from, what are the water resources that we are using, which aquifer does it come to, how sustainable is it, how many pressure points are on there, who else is using it, and where does it develop towards in the future. And that is exactly where Water Framework Directive on a big level comes in, because what the river-based management plans are telling us in the long term is what is available for you, and in which condition is it going to come to you, and what is your role in trying to protect this. So there's a close connection between regulation and what we are trying to do under this protect work stream. Reduce, of course, is about efficiency, is a bit like motherhood and apple pie, and I'm not losing a lot of words on this. Recycle, since this year or last year, it is motherhood and apple pie for us in Europe and worldwide as well, because we have for every site a wastewater treatment facility, or we are disposing into urban wastewater treatment that is of a certain level worldwide, and therefore we are maintaining that commitment and want to continue and will continue to treat all our wastewater. And finally is that area of replenishment, which is essentially saying we take out of the environment X million cubic meters in Europe to put in our products. That's what ends up in the bottle or the can. And the equivalent of that, we are investing in projects in order to balance that out in the environment. It is about creating overall a balance. The trick is, it doesn't mean you're producing in, let's say, outside of Stockholm, and whatever you put in your products in Stockholm, you invest locally to have another lake or another aquifer recharge there, because that doesn't make sense. They have enough of water. But we look at this on a global and European perspective and say, in Europe we're using X million cubic meters of water to put in our product. Where are the water stressed areas? We know that where they are. So let's focus on those, and let's work specifically in Southern Europe, but also along the Danube increasingly to work on water quality issues. And just two more things. Of course, partnerships are very important for us to deliver, because we know how to produce soft drinks. We don't know how wetlands work. We don't know how to do conservation. So that's what you need partners for, and WWF, the Global Partnership, is certainly in the center of that. But we're also working with the Global Water Partnership, ICPDR, of course, in Europe, Water Footprint Network, and so on and so forth. So these are really important for us to actually deliver this vision, because we don't assume that we can do this on our own. And the second piece is that you have to be prepared to invest actually in what you want to do. There is a lot of saving that you can explain internally, that you can save money ultimately by bringing your efficiencies down. Again, that is not, not very complicated. But the investment in water resources, in long-term water resources, is quite a tricky one in business terms, because the benefits, of course, are not directly to you, and the cycles are very long. But if you look at the map in Europe of where we are engaged, you basically see, this is a bit of a picture from last year, two main elements. One is what Mr. Stalzer just talked about. Let's engage young people, let's make sure that the next generation is much more aware and much better educated on water. So there are a number of projects there around education and awareness with the ICPDR along the Danube. And Danube Day is just passed, so I hope that was a good event again, to bring really a lot of dynamism and momentum into young people especially, and people around the Danube benefiting from the river. And the other piece is very different. It's where the red arrows are. This is where we engage with WWF, or the Global Water Partnership, really in creating, so to speak, new water resources. And if you look at the investments that are going on these red arrows, they've been with the help of the Coca-Cola Foundation Europe. The last 2 years we've invested 2 million euros just in water conservation projects across Europe, with particular focus on the Danube, on Greece and Malta, and on Spain, because there we say this is where it really matters, this is where water resources really in the long term are going to suffer, and where we can make actually a difference. It's separate, and a very new one is the UK, where yes, that has something to do with water quantity work, but it's mainly around water quality, which I'm very excited about, because it gives a completely new element and us a better understanding as well how we can make this replenish idea work for water quality. And the very practical thing WW is helping us there is to try to reduce diffuse pollution into the rivers there and the water resources there from agriculture, which I think is actually the way forward for us to connect the sourcing and the water stewardship work and bring them together. And I think that is my last slide. Thank you.